All right. So we are in our last week of fear, and this is nice. We just did 5 weeks of fear, and I think this time in our lives this was like extremely appropriate because we all went through, I guess, some either fearful moments or some worrisome times with the hurricane coming in, losing power, not being able to get on the internet. Right? That was the worst. Take whatever you want, don't take the internet. And then we have another storm that comes and gives us another hit. So there's just like, this is just a time of like so much worrisome and so much like full of fear. And so even if you guys don't want to admit it, I'm sure you guys were all worried about something or had some sort of fear or worry going on in your life. So this is the last week. We're wrapped up after this in our series called Nothing to Fear? ? So I'm going to tell you guys a true story about my life. And this might sound made up, but I promise you every aspect of the story is true. And even my good friends don't know this about me. My sister knows, my parents who are in the room, they also know, and then a couple other people. But even for the most part, like my good friends in my life don't know that this story happened to me. But I promise you, it's all true. This is a story about the stupidest thing I've ever done. And what I did was I let a scary stranger into my car in the middle of the Bronx because he led me to believe that he'd be able to lead us back to New Jersey because we were lost. So I'm going to read this story just because I wrote it down and for the effect and all. This is about the most fearful moment of my life. And please remember, this is all totally true. The year was 2003. I was but a college boy. I had just finished my first semester. I carried a video camera everywhere I went. I was one of the big men on campus, and I had just bought new jeans. And there I was. I found myself on a snowy rooftop in the Bronx, in the dead of winter, late at night, staring eye to eye with my attacker. There's nothing to fear, right? I know God will protect me, no matter the situation. My God, who I've been faithful to for years, will keep me from harm. Why wouldn't he, right? Then why am I lost in the Bronx? Why do I feel more fear in my life than I've ever had at this moment right now? Why am I out of breath? Why am I shaking? And why are my hands covered in my own blood? This doesn't make sense. God, I need you. I'm praying to you right now, but I'm hearing nothing. All I'm thinking is, why, when I pray to him, do my prayers go unanswered? Why, when I stand face to face with very real danger and full of fear, is God not showing up like I'm expecting him to? My cell phone had just died while I was on the phone with 911. They asked me my location. I said I was on a rooftop. They said, that doesn't help. Then the line went dead. My battery died. God. I was alone, except for the man holding my video camera that he stole from the backseat of my car. I was alone. I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have fallen asleep when my cousin was driving us back from college in Connecticut. If only I hadn't fallen asleep, we wouldn't have been lost in a part of New York City that I had never been to before. And I start to think back to times in my life when I've fallen asleep before. Maybe not a literal falling asleep, but a time in my life where I stopped paying attention because I was safe. Maybe I was too safe. I had everything I wanted. Great family, good friends, enough money so I didn't have to worry about my expenses. There was a time in my life where I just got too comfortable and I was just in cruise control. I no longer had to challenge myself. I didn't have to worry about things because my family would take care of whatever I needed. I didn't have to fear. I didn't have to be afraid. There was just no point in it. And that's where I was then. I wish that's where I was still. But life has a funny way of getting you to overthink things, and fear just starts to creep in, little by little. There's a verse about worrying in Luke 12:25. Who of you can add a single hour to your life by worrying? If you can't do something as simple as this, why worry about the other things in God's eyes? It sounds so simple to do. Of course, God says that there's no need to worry, right? So no one worries. Wouldn't that be something, if it were true? If I could get on an airplane and not be worried that the plane wouldn't arrive safely? Not be scared that another one of my family members is going to be taken from a disease that they have no control over? Not be intimidated when doing something new for the first time? Not be insecure when meeting someone new for the first time? Or nervous when I speak in front of people every time? Wouldn't that be something? Or scared to look foolish? Am I a bad Christian for worrying? Does worrying make God upset with me? Lord, I want to trust you. I want to take your word and hide it in my heart. That way when friends poke fun at my faith, I'll have the perfect answer to show them and you that I love you. And I'll put them in their place. Lord, I want that, but I'm scared. Because what if? What if I mess up? What if I look foolish? What if by not saying exactly what I'm supposed to say, I somehow ruin it for all Christianity? And my friends won't accept me or think I'm cool? What if I make the wrong decision that snowy night and let a hitchhiker into my car because he says he knows the best way to get back to Jersey? And then he leads us to some side street and steals my video camera out of the back seat. It's the one thing that I think is irreplaceable in my young life. But there's nothing to fear. If God is with me, then who can be against me? I'll tell you who. How about that criminal that just stole my video camera, that had chased through the streets and through buildings in the Bronx? He's against me. That guy's against me. I chased him into a back alley where he climbed a fence. I was up and over it easily because I've seen enough chase action movies. But in the movie, the top of the fence isn't spiked and sharp, leaving me with cuts and gashes on my hands and stomach and my ripped jeans, my new jeans that I had just bought. I bought them because I thought they looked cool. But more so, honestly, I bought them because I thought they looked enough like my friend's jeans that I'd be accepted. Now, it's not something I thought about consciously or even knew it was really there, but that was stored in my brain. It was hardwired and tied to my self-image. That what other people thought of me really is what mattered. Because what if? What if I don't fit in? What if I embarrass myself? What if I say something dumb and my friends don't accept me? What if I don't make the team? Or get good grades? Or don't make the cut for the school play? Would my family not be proud of me? Or worse, would they never say anything and I'll believe that they're not happy with me and that there's no way I can prove to them that I'm important or valued or that I love them? What if something happens to my family? What if I get a phone call about a car accident or a brain tumor or death? The last thing I said to my parents, what was it? Was it something mean? Was it something I can't take back? I couldn't remember exactly the last thing I said to my parents that night. I stood on the snowy rooftop. Was it meaningful? Was it I love you? The hitchhiker thief climbed the second top of the fence and then jumped to a rooftop nearby. I followed him with ease, fueled now by adrenaline along with my fear. It was a standoff. He had nowhere to go. I tried to reason with him. I tried to reason with myself. Why am I up here? Why did I dangerously chase after someone and put myself at risk for something that's so replaceable? What if I didn't get it back, I think? What if he pulled a knife or a gun? What then? Why am I up here? Lord, I need an answer and I need one quick. What do I do? I took a step towards him and he backed to the snowy ledge. 2 stories up all of a sudden looked a lot higher. He looked at me, then down at the ground, and then back at me. There was a very quiet moment of the two of us just staring at each other. I took another step towards him, and he jumped. I ran to the edge and got there just in time to see him limping away, camera still in hand. There was a fence nearby that I jumped to halfway down and sprang off to soften the landing. I looked up and he was gone. What just happened? This shouldn't have happened to me. This isn't me at all. I'm a thin, white, 18-year-old guy who plays baseball and ping pong. I'm not the chase after the bad guy type of guy. What am I doing? Again, I thought about running down another dingy alley after my camera to be a hero, and thought, what if I got it back? Would that somehow justify this whole stupidity? Would that make a great ending to the story? Would that make me feel better? Would that make me better off because I regained what was lost? What if I turned around? Was I somehow a coward then? Would my mistake of letting a strange man into my car be justified now because I got my camera back? No. That past mistake I couldn't take back. But I could make a better choice starting that moment. Instead of chasing after him again, I turned and jumped back over the fence. More carefully this time, to not leave any more cuts and gashes. I didn't have to search long to find my panicked-looking cousin who was searching for me too. I got in his car, and we left. We left that place and never looked back. I left my camera bag and that mistake behind me. So that, my friends, was the scariest time of my life, coupled with probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. If you guys haven't figured out, these are the jeans that I wore that night. The only cut that I actually got that night was right here in the center, back, right there. All these other cuts I then made myself to justify that cut. I sewed him up afterwards to kind of keep him as nostalgic and a reminder. If you want afterwards, you can see the scar on my hand from jumping over the fence. Luckily, my stomach healed, so I don't have any on there. Also, you can ask Kara and my parents, who are both in the room. I was on the phone with my dad when the guy jumped out of my car. The last thing my dad heard me say was, "Hey, that's my camera!" And then I jump out and I start chasing after this guy like an idiot. And I'm fast. I caught up to him immediately, but I didn't know what to do. So I'm jogging next to him, looking at my camera, and I'm like, "Hey!" Like, that's going to justify it somehow. And then I reached for it, and he pulled it back and gave me a look like I'm doing something wrong. I was like, wait a second, no, this isn't like role reversal all of a sudden. So I hung up the phone with Dad right before I started giving chase. And he then, of course, told Kara and Mom what was going on. And I found out later that my mom hit her knees right then and was praying for me the entire time. And that was such an encouragement afterwards when I found that out. So that was a pretty wild night. I've only retold that story one other time to a group of about 10 people over a campfire. But honestly, after that, I look at things differently. I have ever since then. It was a real defining moment. I care way less about things that I can replace. And I've been, from that point on, I started focusing way more on things that I can't replace, like relationships and spending time with people. So that whole what if, that I spent so much time thinking about that night, that what if, that's still there. But I started thinking about, what if I thought of what if differently? What if my what if wasn't so focused on me and wasn't so focused on us, and I took it and I switched it dramatically? Think about it. What if you thought about helping others more than yourself? This week and the last week and the week before that with the hurricane, I think it's been a perfect time that we've been focusing on other people more than ever before. Because that initial night when everyone's out of power and everyone's thinking about how are we going to get okay or whatever, after that we start realizing that other people really got injured and really got their houses destroyed and all this other stuff. So I think a lot of us have been focusing outside of ourselves more than ever before in the past 3 weeks. And I think that's really awesome. We went to Staten Island, got a shirt there. We were making food for people. We've opened up our homes more than ever before. We've been thinking and praying for people more than ever before, I think. So this has been such an obvious time of service and giving. And it's really apropos with our Fear series. But think about it. What if we prayed, Jesus, let me think of other people today? Because I know my prayers almost always start with, Lord, this is what I need. Let me get through my list. And if we have time, I'll think of some other people. Or I had this note on my wall that I wrote down many years ago, and I look at it all the time, and it's something I struggle with constantly. And it just says, Jesus, for 10 minutes today, can I please think of someone else besides me? Imagine if you took 10 minutes and just focused it outward, focused it on somebody else. So what if we weren't so worried about defending our faith, and when someone comes at us with our faith, and we're like, listen, I don't fully understand, I don't have the best answers, but I love Jesus and he loves me. Wouldn't that be something? What if we didn't worry so much about dying or sickness, and we worried about living for Christ? What if we weren't so worried about our self-image, and we thought about looking more like Christ? Wouldn't that be something? So that what if, it's still there. It changes it, What if we took that what if and we focused it somewhere else? So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about a guy named Paul from the Bible. Some of you guys know who Paul is. Turned out to be a good guy. But Paul turned out to be this amazing, amazing man of God. And when he did something, he was totally all in. He was just, whatever he was wrapped up in, that's what he was wrapped up in. And before his conversion experience, before he became a Christian, his whole job and his whole mission in life was to kill and persecute Christians. And he was super good at it. So that was his focus. That's what he spent time doing. And then finally, God just said, no more. No. You're done doing that. And he showed up. Tell me there's no time in your life where you're more scared than when Jesus or God shows up in front of you. He was on a road to Damascus, is this place in the Old Testament, and God showed up and said, you're done doing that, you're going to serve me now. And of course, Paul just said, yeah, you got it. It's an awesome story. It's in Acts 9. You guys should read Acts. It's a great, great story. It's the follow-up to the Gospels. And then when Paul decided to follow Christ, again, just like his personality, he was all in again. And his faith became unwavering. You could not shake this guy. After he became a Christian, he did everything for God. He lived his life 100% for God no matter what. And that used to get people really mad all the time. And he had all these religious goons after him, trying to kill him, trying to imprison him, trying to do all this stuff. And his story is incredible, but he had so many things go wrong in his life, in a row. that you would think that he'd have to question his faith just a little bit. Like, have you ever sent a text message and it doesn't go through, and all of a sudden I start to think, maybe I'm not supposed to send that. Maybe that was God's will, not to send that text message. But, I mean, that's just like a simple thing. But, like, he had all these things. Like, this is some stuff that he went through. He was imprisoned, beaten, and left for dead on more than one occasion. They tried to stone him. They tried to kill him, do all this stuff. He was shipwrecked at least twice, maybe 3 times. And my favorite, he gets shipwrecked. He has to swim to an island. He gets to the island and immediately gets bit by a snake. At what point are you just like, oh, come on! God, I'm doing your work here. Give me a break. But he had people threatening him and trying to hurt him all the time, just to like scare him into stop doing God's work. But you couldn't shake this guy. They would say to him, well, we'll kill you. And Paul would say, well, if I was going to die for Christ, I would consider that a victory. Fine, then we'll leave you alone. Well, if I'm going to live for Christ. And then we'll torture you if you're going to live like that. Well, I don't compare these earthly sufferings for the later future glory in heaven. And they'll say, well, fine, then we'll put you in prison. He says, I don't care. I'll sing every song I know. I'll convert you, your guards, and the other prisoners. It's like you just couldn't touch this guy. It was amazing. Paul was absolutely amazing. So how do you take someone who has every reason to fear and become one of the most fearless men in the Bible? How does that happen? Like, how is that possible? And if you read along in Acts and when it talks about Paul, like, Paul was very focused on the fact that this earth, that this was not his end goal. That his victory was coming somewhere else. And like his victory was coming later on in heaven with Christ. Because if earth, guys, honestly, if earth, like right now, is your end goal, you have to be fearful of everything. Of like everything. Because you have to worry about what people think of you. You have to worry about how successful you are in the world's eyes, because all of a sudden your reputation matters a lot because you live off your reputation. You got to be scared of death. Because without Jesus, this earth, this is it. This is the best it gets. You got to be YOLOing it all the time. Like, this is it. But you have to be careful of like every single step that you take, because everything would matter. And Paul understood. This is what Paul understood: that when your life isn't your own, it's a different story. There's a different ending to your story. Because all of a sudden you have someone who's focused on you constantly, and you don't have to fear. And that person is God. And he's focused on you constantly. Like, there's always, like, you know how your parents worry about you most of the time? This guy, God is always focused 100% on you. That's just one of the awesome things about God that we can't even understand. What a lot of people don't realize, like, I hear a lot of people say, Lord, be with me today as I go through the struggle. Like, I catch myself saying that, but it's not, you don't need it. You're never alone. When you decide to follow Christ, God is living in you. You are never alone after that. Not when you're walking home and scared of like the one lone person walking by you or something. Not when you're up giving a speech, or you're up on stage performing, or you're on the sports field, or you're in like a tough situation at school. You're never alone. And fear is honestly, it's so mind-numbing and it grips you because you feel like you're by yourself. Like you feel like there's no way out and you have no control over that situation. That's why fear like owns you. So then you think, okay, well, how do we fix that? Or at least how do we start to fix that fear? And now I'm wrapping up with this, so almost done. But I believe that if I were to ask you, you don't have to answer this, but if I were to ask you, okay, how do we fear less? Or like when they ask you in your life group, how do we fear less? Every one of you guys would come up with something similar to, well, you have to trust God more. Or they say Psalms 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But honestly, when I get scared and I'm frightened, the last thing that pops into my head is like a verse. You know, it's like that initial fear, and then I have to be like, think about it, and maybe I'll get to something that's like encouraging. But you know the beautiful thing is though, that even if we aren't sure if God is with us, like He is. He's definitely with you. We never have to question that. And once you decide to be a Christ follower, Christian we call it, Jesus lives within you. We honestly believe that. I 100% believe that with everything in me. And there's that little, you know how you guys feel that little voice inside of you that tells you like what's the right and what's wrong? I believe that's God telling you like what's right and what's wrong. But there's another voice that's in you. That's God talking to you, telling you, there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. And if you would just quiet down to listen, sometimes you'd be able to hear it. But most of the time that we have so much stuff going on in our lives, we can't hear it because the world is just too noisy. Like there's all these things distracting us. And the more time that you spend with God, the louder that voice becomes. And the clearer that voice becomes. I say it every single time I'm up here. I'll say it every single time I have a microphone. God loves you and He wants to spend time with you. He wants you to read His Word. He wants you to set time aside to spend with Him. And honestly, the more you do, the less you'll worry and the less you'll fear. Those are promises in the Bible. The more time you spend with them, the less frightened you're going to be about different things. So the next time you're in a snowy rooftop situation, and that's different for everybody. What your most fearful moment is, or when you fear something and it just grips you. You have to know in your heart that God is protecting you and that you honestly have nothing to fear. So instead of asking yourself, what if? What if this goes terribly wrong? What if I mess up? What if this doesn't go the way I need it to go? Ask yourself instead, what if I gave this situation to God? What if then? So now it's life group time. If you guys don't have a life group, meet up by Sarah. She's going to be back there. If you do, hold on. If you do have a life group, you guys probably know where you're at. But I'm going to take just a moment to pray, and then we'll be wrapped up. So if you'll bow your head and pray with me. Lord, thank you for every kid and every person in this room. Lord, thank you for this life group time that we have just to spend time talking about you and other things that matter. Lord, we thank you for what you're doing in each one of these kids' lives, and remind them constantly that you're there for them. And they never have to pray, Lord, be with me, because you're there. Lord, and put in them a desire to chase after you, to get around you, and to be more like you, Lord. And be with us this day. Thank you for everything you have going on. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Love you.